What's your favorite idea? Mine
Don't
is
Hug Me, I'm
being
Scared has
creative.
just marked off its existence with an epic finale, closing off nearly 5 years of intricate horrors passing themselves off as dreams of childhood. In the past half a decade, so many people have banded together to figure out exactly what this series means, what it represents, and what story it is trying to tell. And after all this time, we finally have built up a definitive, accepted version of the narrative. A veiled allegory for the British media changing the face of civilization and warping the minds of our youth. This theory, this beautiful, fascinating theory, no longer has any real bearing. From the get-go, the suggestion that the musical numbers in the story represented the effects that the media had on the planet as a whole was far-fetched in my mind. Oh, I found it interesting. I was absorbed by the idea, but I knew that it was little more than a hunch, a vague guess based around dates and just the nature of the channel itself. When I first heard the idea mentioned, it was so disjointed from all the other info presented that I was under the impression that just in a few more updates it would be swiftly dropped like so many FNAF postulations that fell before. But amazingly, this hunch has kept up in the community since it first arose. Not because the theory has been confirmed, but rather because it hasn't been unconfirmed. And it's just my impression that people are trying too hard to figure out how the 6th episode fits with the theory, rather than seeing if the theory still makes any sense. And in my personal opinion, it does not. Riddle me this. What is the depiction of the real world supposed to represent in this elongated allegory? Why is everyone else as boring and cynical as Red was at the beginning of episode 1? Okay, you'll say, because the media hasn't gotten to them yet. But if that's the case, then what is the message now? That being raised by the media helps people be more enjoyable to be around? That's a strangely nuanced position for a show that supposedly is also depicting the media as a group that brainwashes people to force them to avoid truths. And why would everyone but Red be raised without the influence of the media? Can you imagine being in a room where you are the only person who grew up watching TV? The idea alone is not one you can take seriously. That last thing is what broke the camel's back. I simply cannot imagine someone setting out to make the story to be a veiled allegory for the global media establishment when they make artistic decisions like showing its power being limited. All I'm saying is, I think there might be a better answer out there, and that's what I want to find today. So what have we learned so far? That the household that most of the Don't Hug Me series is set in is not a widespread, normal upbringing for these characters that live in the outer universe that we see in the finale. It affects the main three, but it is not a thing that every person has a history with. Throughout the series, the three meet up with various singing beings around them who attempt to feed them misinformation and lies about life. More often than not, these creatures are constantly steering them in the wrong direction. The skewed lessons on body health, love, and other topics try to smother the minds of the three. Whenever a character brings up dissenting thoughts or opinions, they are quickly shot down and attacked until those thoughts clear the air. There is no room for intelligent discovery or free thought. It's all predestined, limited. One of the most telling moments in the series is one where a globe turns to them as they wait in anticipation of another lesson. The real world is literally revealing itself to them. But just as they try to confront reality, they are again interrupted by a creature that tries to force-feed them misinformation and lies. I do think that the assumption that this world has been created entirely for brainwashing is correct. And specifically, I think that this world is obviously created and controlled by Roy, the father of Yellow Guy. Roy has a warped psyche, a disturbed view of the world. This is probably why the lessons and adventures always turn out to be so dark in the end. Not because of anything wrong with the children, but because of the soiled nature of Roy himself. Throughout the series, the characters slowly begin to realize that the world around them isn't real, and they all react in their own ways. Red is no longer able to be a part of the world, but clearly somehow still has a loose line of communication. Green decides to revolt and tries to break apart the world, and this ends with him being... well, I'm not really sure. The literal interpretation is that he's packed into cans of food and fed to Yellow, but I feel like there's probably another meaning that I'm missing out on here. Finally, in the climactic episode, we see Yellow, all alone, begin to understand that this world is not a fun place to be in, and it is one that he doesn't want to be a part of. But unlike the others, he cannot escape. He has to be a part of it. No matter how much he knows, it is destroying him. We see Red brought back into Roy's world, where he tries to free Yellow to no avail. Roy tries to stop Red from interfering, but upon seeing how the world is truly destroying his son, he decides to allow Red to finally pull the plug. When he does so, everything resets and time starts moving for the first time since the very beginning. This full narrative is so crazy that it truly does feel like without an explanation of what it's all supposed to represent, we're left in the dark. Well, after considering the evidence for quite a while, I think I have an answer that makes a whole lot of sense. Have you ever heard about someone who's part of an Amish household trying to move away and live in a regularly populated area? These families will be raised in a bubble, a completely different world from what we can comprehend. And when they leave, they have to face the possibility that that means they can never return, cutting themselves off from their loved ones and their place of upbringing for good. And even if they do pull through, they can then face a hard time in the quote, real world as well. They just aren't wired the same way as everyone else, and they have trouble communicating to others. I feel like this is pretty close to what Red was going through in episode 6. I am not literally trying to put forward that the entire Don't Hug Me series is a veiled allegory for the Amish community, but I think the idea of a household raising their children to be a certain way, even if it goes in direct conflict with their human nature, is something that we see quite a lot in normal society.
Did you get to the part on here where it says that science doesn't prove anything? And it's really interesting when you look at it that way.
It is.
It is.
All right.
All right.
I think personally that Galileo made the right choice by giving up science for Christ.
I realize that this comparison might make some people uncomfortable, but in my mind a scene like this is exactly what Don't Hug Me is trying to present in some sort of foggy sense. The boy's father, Roy, has been trying to show them a tinted view of the planet around them so that they will always represent his views and so that they will grow up to be just like him. He forces them to take on his own views on religion, love, and so many other things. The characters are taught to live an unhealthy life, where they are supposed to deny facts and logic, and instead are to accept things that they have been told to be eternal truths. Slowly, they all start to step away from the household as they realize that this bubble that they have been raised in all this time is simply not absolute. Red is shown to have graduated and become an adult, where he lives his life set to his own free will, but he can't help but feel so eagerly nostalgic for the life that he had lived with Roy, even if it wasn't the most healthy relationship. The people around him seem so bland and lifeless to him because he didn't have a normal upbringing. He has trouble understanding other people because his mind is different from theirs. And last but not least, when he pulls the plug and resets time, this is of course the birth of a new generation. And this generation now lives how the original 3 wanted to from episode 1. The room has a green tint to it, and an added door suggests a new level of freedom. But is this really true? Of course, everyone points to the fact that the 3 characters now have the colors that they all liked in episode 1 as a sign that they now all have free will. But remember, these are the descendants of the original 3, not the original team. So, are they just pushing their own personal views onto their children without their consent? Have they really moved on? Or are they making the same mistakes that Roy did? Just as this question is asked, the answer is loud and bold.
What's your favorite idea?
Or at least, that's my take on the whole thing. What I've decided that I like about this series is that it's sort of loose. Other people are going to find their own answers and takes on the story, and in the end, none of us are very likely to be correct. It's a very creative and intelligent series, the likes of which we are never likely to see again. I want to commend the creative team for making something so awesome and so much fun, and I look forward to seeing what comes next. So did you like my theory? Do you have any thoughts? Did I hit too close to home? Be sure to leave your thoughts in the comment box below. I'm Quentin Kyle Hoover, and that's all you need.